Hello and welcome to Mid-Coast Morning, CHLY's weekly current affairs show. I'm Joe Pugh.
And I'm Elijah Robinson.
Here's what we're following this week. Following the release of the latest report from the UN's International Panel on Climate Change, we investigated the climate response locally. I spoke with Heather Baitz, president of the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub, a relatively new advocacy group, as well as with Jeremy Holm from the City of Nanaimo to get a clearer picture on how our city is taking on this global crisis. The climate crisis goes hand in hand with the wildfires we're fighting more and more every year in BC. To get more perspective on the situation, our Elijah Robinson spoke with Erika Berg of the Provincial Wildfire Service. And finally, I spoke with Kamal Parmar, Nanaimo's new Poet Laureate. I learned about what a Poet Laureate actually does, about Kamal's style and passion for poetry, as well as what makes a good haiku. We begin, however, with a look at the headlines from CHLY's Elijah Robinson.
As of Thursday, over 500 new COVID-19 cases were reported in the province, pushing the active cases close to 4,000. There are 81 hospitalizations with 33 British Columbians in critical care. Island Health projects an upward trend in cases with 193 active cases on the island. At the provincial COVID update conference, Dr. Bonnie Henry says,
"Today, we need to take an additional step to reduce transmission. We are announcing mandatory vaccination as a condition of employment for all workers in long-term care and seniors assisted living. In addition, we will have the implementation in the interim of the requirement for unvaccinated staff to wear masks and additional PPE, as well as being tested regularly. We will then be working with the individual staff, individual facilities to make sure that every person has access to vaccination and has their questions answered. And everybody, all workers in all facilities will need to be fully vaccinated by October 12th of this year."
Over 7 million doses have been administered in the province, as nearly 3/4 of its population have received at least the first dose, while over 60% are fully vaccinated. The Nanaimo RCMP is also warning Nanaimo citizens to practice online safety, following a number of local reports of online fraud in the past 2 weeks. On how to stay safe and secure while online, Media Relations Officer of the Nanaimo RCMP Constable Gary O'Brien says,
"The first thing is you always have to keep your radar up. You have to be leery of people who are asking you for something. Accredited firms such as Microsoft and Google and large multinational firms will never contact you directly on your computer. And be aware that there are many fraudulent sites that are popping up and you think you're on a legitimate site and you're not. Go to the Google taskbar, type in the company name, ensure that you type it correctly, because there are sites that pop up based on typos as well. Once you're satisfied that you're on a legitimate site, only then look for information. But be very aware. If you're not comfortable browsing on your computer, ask for help from somebody, from a friend or a trusted family member."
This past week, the UN's International Panel on Climate Change released their 6th assessment, the most up-to-date climate science available. There were a number of conclusions in the report, including that global surface temperature will continue to increase until at least the mid-century under all emission scenarios considered, that it is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the planet, ocean, and land, and that limiting human-induced global warming to a specific level requires limiting cumulative CO2 emissions, reaching at least net zero CO2 emissions, along with strong reductions in other greenhouse gas emissions. To understand what Nanaimo could be doing to combat climate change on a local level, I checked in with Heather Baitz, president of the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub, a local climate advocacy group that was founded last year. Can you tell me about the kinds of things, the kinds of initiatives or changes you're calling for?
Yes, well, we're actually quite a new organization. Just since November, we started up. And so we're kind of still getting the ball rolling on exactly what the full scope will be of what we want to call for. But so far, we have done some initiatives, including getting public support for some important changes at the city council level, including the adoption of the donut economics model, as well as allocating some additional funding for active transportation infrastructure, like more bike lanes and walkable paths.
I wanted to talk about the donut model of economics. So it was the City of Nanaimo, they adopted that late last year, and they became the first Canadian city to adopt this so-called donut model of economics. For anyone who's unfamiliar with it, could you give a quick explanation?
Sure. The concept is that we want to be our cities as well as our whole global population to be living in a place where we're below the ecological ceilings of our finite planet. So that means we're not putting out more pollution than our planet can handle. We're not emitting more CO2 and other greenhouse gases than our planet can safely tolerate. We're not poisoning the waters. That we're basically living within the capacity of our planet, but also that the inside of the donut is the basic level of meeting the needs of people both locally and globally. So it's like we want to be in the sweet spot there where our economy is working in a way that everybody has their basic needs met, yet we're not overshooting and doing so much that we're ruining the planet at the same time.
So what does adopting that model mean on an actionable, concrete policy level for the city?
Well, I think the city is in the process of kind of working out some of the details of what that's going to look like for us. But my understanding is that they're choosing a variety of indicators, and they're going through this Reimagine Nanaimo process right now to get public input on those indicators. And that's going to kind of help them to see, okay, when they're making any sort of a policy decision, they want to look at what will the impact be on these different aspects of how it affects people's ability to have their basic needs met, both locally and globally, as well as how will that policy or decision impact, our effects on those ecological ceilings, again, globally and locally, right? So they might want to, let's say they're deciding on, some plans for building infrastructure, or where they're going to allocate some funds for transportation. They might be thinking about, can they source their materials in a way that avoids any kind of negative impacts on local people as well as on globally. And let's say for ethical sourcing of products they might be buying, they might mean that they would adopt policies of maybe paying livable wage or supporting companies that would pay a livable wage. It might mean that they would, factor in, okay, if we put a housing complex here versus over there, how does that influence the pollution that's going to come from that? So, something like having housing be located close to where amenities are, where workplaces are, where childcare and schools are, close to transit, that's going to mean that people don't need to drive to get to where they need to go, right? So that would be something that would be a decision that could be made within that donut model to say, okay, people need, affordable housing. That's a basic need, but we also need to stay within our limit of how much we can pollute into the atmosphere. So they would be taking all those factors into consideration when they're making policy decisions.
Right, and I know it's still fairly new. It's a fairly recent development that they've adopted this model. Have we seen anything happen so far? That's any decisions that have taken it into account?
There's nothing that I'm aware of personally. That I can specifically point to and say, like, this happened because of the donut economics model. But, I know one project that's under consideration right now is the expansion of the waterfront walkway. And that's something that, again, the city is looking for public input, or they had been, I don't know if it's still open, looking for public input on a project to expand and enhance a walkway and amenities along the waterfront. So, for me, that's something that when I'm thinking about my own input into that kind of a project, I'm thinking about, okay, well, of course, we want to make sure that we're not having, too much impact on the ecology of the area. Can this be done in a way that it doesn't have too severe of a negative impact on the environment, yet it also does potentially bring benefits in terms of helping people have more active transportation options, have a destination and fun things to do that don't require them to drive a long ways out of town, for example, and can it be helpful in terms of preserving any natural areas or enhancing any kind of ecosystems. So, I think it's a lens that we might look through as any kind of decisions are being made.
Right. And outside of the donut model, would you say that the city's action on climate policy from your group's view has been sufficient? How would you grade it?
Well, our group is new, and I myself am fairly new to Nanaimo, so I wouldn't want to, comment on the historical policies because I don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of that. I think it's a problem across the board in communities all over BC, as well as our province and country as a whole, that we have this history of setting targets for how much we're going to reduce our emissions. And Nanaimo was the same, that I believe it was 2010 or so that they set a target for reducing the emissions by a certain percentage over a decade or so, and instead our emissions have actually gone up because it's one thing to sort of say that we have a target, but you need to have the policies and the funding and support to actually make those things happen. And right now, what we're seeing is that city councils are fairly limited in terms of how much jurisdiction they have and how much funding they have to actually make the big changes that really matter. For instance, natural gas is a fossil fuel, and it's the way that many people are heating their homes and as well as heating other buildings. It's a fossil fuel. It adds to our greenhouse gas emissions. And right now it's very cheap to heat your home with natural gas, unfortunately, which means a lot of people are switching away from electric baseboard heaters to getting natural gas put into their homes. And, that's a huge problem when we look at our community emissions. In terms of what the city can actually do about that, they actually do not have jurisdiction to even restrict new natural gas hookups in new construction. That would require provincial approval at this point. And they don't have, really any way of regulating a lot of things like that. So I think what we're seeing is that our current city council, is quite progressive, at least in a number of the way the votes have gone, is that people are really recognizing the state of emergency that we're in with respect to the climate. And at least some of our city council members do take that very seriously and are working to find as many ways as they can to actually implement policies in the city level that will help. But they are limited by their jurisdiction and their funding.
Right. And with jurisdiction, you're a local advocacy group. The climate emergency is about as global as it can get. How do you motivate local actors, whether they're the city or whether they're like local businesses or individuals? How can you focus on motivating them to contribute to something where the success or the failure, it depends on billions of others also taking action?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think our key strategy so far has been mobilizing public support. That's really a key strategy for any sort of level of making change happen in the political realm. And when, there are a few people who have the power to make these big decisions, that what we're seeing is that a lot of politicians are concerned that there's not enough public support to take the extreme measures that are really required at this point in the emergency. They're concerned that people aren't ready. And when in fact, when we look at polling data from the last several years, we see that more than 80% of Canadians are worried or very worried about climate change and are in support of governments doing what's needed in order to solve the problem. So really the gap seems to me like it's in, we just need to help get enough people using their voices to express their concern and express their support for the changes that are necessary. And a big part of that is making sure that it's all done in a very fair way that does not negatively impact or disproportionately impact people who are already, struggling, have lower incomes or otherwise disadvantaged in our society. That we really absolutely need to push for policies that give us a more equal society, a more fair society, at the same time as protecting our source of life, which is our planet that is under threat.
And I'm wondering if you're working with any knowledge holders or local First Nations in any of the advocacy that you're doing?
Well, we have made some efforts to reach out, to put out invitations to local First Nations to join us and to participate and have conversations. Now, we're also very aware that, especially right now, a lot of different organizations are thinking about this, which is great. But we can also, sometimes be at the risk of kind of putting too much on those groups where they've got quite enough to deal with when it comes to just managing everything that's been put on them already by our colonial society, and we don't want to expect them to do work for us. So so far we're taking an approach that we are attentive and open to listening and having partnerships where there is interest in that, but we don't want to be kind of pushing it and come across as demanding that we get involvement from folks who may already have their plates full.
And is there anything else you think people in Nanaimo should know about the climate situation locally on August 11th, 2021?
Well, I think the biggest message that I want to get out is that we tend to feel like as a single person, it's overwhelming and it's like futile and impossible. And what can one person possibly do to make a difference in this humongous problem? And actually that there are things you can do. And for some people, that means taking personal action to reduce your own carbon impact, your own climate pollution. But for other people, that can mean more of a focus on advocacy, and that, you know, our government works for us, and that your voice does count, especially when you join up with the group, whether it's our group or any of the many other groups locally or around the world that are doing this work, that your voice does matter. And it's actually really freeing, I found, you know, from the anxiety of climate change, to actually start participating and working towards the solutions. And so I would just encourage folks to get involved and take that plunge and reach out and find other people who are working on this and jump in.
Heather Baitz, president of the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub. You're listening to Mid-Coast Morning on CHLY. I also checked in with the city to find out about what actions are being taken to combat the climate crisis in Nanaimo right now. I spoke with Jeremy Holm, Director of Development Approvals with the City of Nanaimo. What are some of the climate plans in place at the city level?
Yeah, no, great question, and definitely very topical given the current heat wave we're experiencing, and one of a few over the summer, and obviously a very challenging wildfire season, and the UN report highlighting the urgency. The City of Nanaimo Council in 2019 issued a climate emergency declaration and set the greenhouse gas reduction targets, the mitigation targets for the city in that declaration. The city has had since 2012 a climate action plan, a mitigation plan in place since 2012 that is actually being updated as part of the Reimagine Nanaimo Comprehensive Policy Review project that's currently underway. So the 2012 plan was the Community Sustainability Action Plan, and that's being updated as we speak. There's work going on towards updating the community's climate mitigation strategy, and with the climate emergency declaration targets as guiding that work, and as well looking to update the comprehensive policies that are our official community plan, our transportation master plan, and a number of other significant policy documents to reflect the climate mitigation initiatives that the city actions and strategies that we'll be undertaking. There's another side to that, obviously, and you touched on. So that's the mitigation side. What do we need to do responsibly to do our part to lower greenhouse gas emissions to meet targets? But there's also the climate adaptation side. And that's what do we need to do to responsibly prepare the community for the impacts of climate change that are, as the UN has added urgent attention to, is that the changes are happening and we see them around us now, and they're unfortunately inevitable, but we can do our mitigation part and globally, hopefully, to minimize the change in temperature and intensity of weather events and the like that comes with that, but sea level rise and other impacts. But on the climate adaptation side, preparing the community for the impacts, Council adopted in 2020 a climate resilience strategy, and that sets out a high-level strategy, the goals and direction the city needs to take, issues that we need to tackle to, and our partners as well in the community need to tackle to address the inevitable impacts of climate change and prepare for that.
So there, like you've outlined, there's really two main prongs to the city's response. There is how can we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and then there's the other piece that is climate change is going to happen. It's inevitable, so how can we prepare to deal with some of the effects? So maybe starting with that first prong, on our emission reduction targets, the city set some targets to go below 50% of our 2010 levels by 2030, and between 94 and 107% reductions below 2010 levels by 2050. The last time the city set targets for greenhouse gas emission reductions was back in 2010, and we set 10-year targets. And not only did we miss those targets, but our emissions went up in Nanaimo. So how do we make sure that doesn't happen again this time?
It's a challenge. It's tricky. It's identifying what are the sources of emissions that are most prevalent and most impactful, and which are the sources that are within the city's scope, and which do we have to advocate and work with others to address. But for instance, we have in the climate action plan update, and we're getting to the point to your question. We're working on those answers through the update to the community sustainability action plan, the climate mitigation plan. So we're working currently on those answers. We're reaching out to the community through the Reimagine Nanaimo process. We have a very capable consulting team engaged on providing advice on how we can achieve those reductions to meet those targets. There's some difficult decisions ahead to meet those targets. One of the key benefits that we have currently that we didn't have previously was that we're actually reviewing our official community plan and other significant strategic policy documents at the same time, and we will be embedding the climate action objectives into those plans, and we'll be aligning the policies in those plans to help to ensure that we achieve those objectives. And then we're going to have to put in, obviously, we're working on monitoring and targets and indicators to monitor our progress towards meeting those objectives. So yeah, to answer your question, we're still in the process of identifying the key strategies and putting in place the tools, the systems, and the processes that we need to make sure that we track progress towards meeting those targets.
So from the sounds of it, the city sets these targets and then later comes up with a plan of how they're going to meet them. Is that accurate?
The emergency declaration has set the target, and that's based on scientifically identified objectives to limit the impacts of climate change and global temperature increases. And so council adopted those targets, and now we are working towards identifying what measures are needed to achieve those targets. What action does the city have to take within our mandate, within our sphere of influence, and then working with others on those outside of our direct scope of influence to address. There is some great background information that I can point you to that would help listeners understand, and any of those interested understand the work that's going on, because it's quite a bit to go over, especially in an audio format. But we do have some great information that's coming out of our Reimagine Nanaimo process, and some workshops that are taking place that listeners could take advantage of to gain a better understanding of what actions we're taking and what our current gaps that have been identified by our consulting team and by the community to achieve those targets are.
So to some extent, city policy is affected directly by elected officials, councils. When governments change at the municipal level, what kind of an impact does that have on the city's ability to have continuous policy and really have 10 or 15 or 20 years that we're trying to meet and set these targets? How does the changing of governments affect our ability to do that?
That's an interesting question. Obviously, federally, provincially, locally, the climate emergency, climate change as an issue has been becoming more and more of an issue that the politicians are being pressed to address, and obviously that can happen locally as well. This council, as I mentioned, has adopted a climate emergency declaration. There are policy documents that, like the official community plan, like the community sustainability action plan, that like the transportation master plan, that are in place and will be in place when the next council comes in, whoever they might be. The council does also set, as most do, they develop their own strategic plan for the community and for their term, and they identify their strategic priorities for that term. Obviously, in this case, this council, climate action is definitely one of their strategic priorities, and they've been focusing on that and putting resources towards that. How it might change, I can't say, but there are policy documents in place that set the tone across the city and for future council, although obviously a future council can a strategic direction for their term or strategic priorities for their term, and hopefully those will align with and continue to implement some of the other high-level policy documents that the city has to set that direction.
And I'm wondering what kind of challenges are created by jurisdiction on something as global as climate change. What are some concrete examples of things the city can control, and what are some things that are out of our hands?
Yeah, access to some of the information is challenging as far as the information that we have available on transportation impacts that municipalities do have a big role in providing transportation options within their community. But as far as the overall broader setting policy direction towards consumer preference and fuel choices and that type of thing is broader, say, electric vehicle rebates and building energy retrofit rebate programs. We have a role in that, but generally, and can contribute strongly towards some of those things, but generally those are set at the provincial and federal level. For instance, building code is British Columbia building code flows from the national building code. The province obviously is taking a keen interest in setting policy and retrofit programs and building code that, as an example, that helps communities achieve and gives them options to assist residents in achieving some of those objectives. But the overall framework is set provincially or federally for those types of things. Like I say, municipalities can do a great deal and you're seeing action here locally to improve, say, the active transportation network, to improve transit service and options, to implement some of the programs that and policy regulations that the federal government and province set. For instance, the City of Nanaimo is implementing the BC Energy Step Code, which is a sort of a building code stream, option to increase building energy efficiency over time towards net zero buildings. So those are things that the city can play an active role in, but the overall policy direction is set at the provincial level. As well, the city has taken advantage of some of the building energy retrofit top-up opportunities that the province has offered through Clean BC. So the city's committed funding to top up provincial energy initiatives. So again, the building energy retrofit initiatives are set at the provincial level, but we've been given an opportunity to top those up, and council has taken that opportunity.
And governments, whether they're municipal or provincial or federal, can have a reputation for being somewhat bureaucratic, and things can be criticized for moving at sometimes a glacial pace. I'm wondering what your perspective on that is when it comes to fighting the climate emergency, and how much of a priority or a focus you would say that is for Nanaimo right now, in terms of there's the emergency declaration, but on a day-to-day level, how much is actually going on to fight that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's been a lot going on I know the climate emergency declaration is 2019, but obviously there have been a lot of initiatives at the city the city's involved in a lot of different activities, day-to-day, a broad range of activities, whether corporately or in the community, that we do have and have had for many years. Like I said, the Sustainability Action Plan was adopted originally in 2012. The city has had for instance, on staff, a corporate energy manager for, I believe it's around 12 years or so, that has been working towards improving the corporate energy efficiency and emissions reductions programs. So vehicle electrification of the city fleet, that type of thing, improving building energy efficiency and taking advantage of retrofit programs to improve the energy efficiency of our facilities and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from city facilities. As well, there's a lot of action to answer the question across the organization. We have an active transportation coordinator that works on, and an engineering team that has designed, and a council that's adopted new complete street standards, which give higher priority to other than auto users, cyclists and pedestrians. And we're implementing through, for instance, the Metro Drive Complete Streets Improvement Project, significant capital investments in complete streets. As I mentioned, there's a list I could go on. I can point your listeners to some of the initiatives that we've identified on our website. We have a green initiatives section of the website that'll help with the understanding, but I mentioned building step code implementation. We're taking advantage of energy retrofit programs. There are many areas that we're working to both deal with the corporate energy emissions reductions as well as community energy emissions reductions.
And are there any...
working
with some of these initiatives, are there any major obstacles you're facing with either the initiatives or the larger fight overall?
Change can be challenging, but there's definitely a strong political will, and there's definitely community interest. We're definitely working to set the tone, the strategic direction for the community through the update to the Community Sustainability Action Plan, so on the mitigation side, the gas reduction side, and as well the climate resilience, the adaptation side. There always will be challenges implementing. Like I said, we will be getting into through the Reimagine Nanaimo process and for instance, some of the land use scenario decision discussions. How will the community develop going forward? How will we accommodate the next 40,000 people, reflecting our greenhouse gas mitigation reduction targets, as well as our climate adaptation responsibility, our obligations there. So yeah, there are definitely some challenges, but the city is focused, and council's provided clear direction and resources towards achieving those, and we're engaging the community in a lot of that work now. But there will be some challenging decisions as we move forward.
And we've spoken a lot about challenging decisions. Like, what are some of those challenging decisions? We talked about the need to balance all of these things with the Reimagine Nanaimo process. The city recently adopted a donut economics model of thinking. I'm wondering if you can shed a little light on how that affects the Reimagine Nanaimo process, and I don't know, maybe just give a little more clarity about how we can accommodate these 40,000 people, implement that donut economics model of thinking, and not just say, oh, we missed our emissions targets.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, the council also gave direction to basically to use the donut economic model, or a scaled down version that the city has been working on in guiding significant decisions going forward. So, and that's been incorporated into the Reimagine Nanaimo process, and it's definitely a key piece of what's being used to evaluate and set the policy direction and the targets, and evaluate the indicators that we need to monitor progress. And so the donut economics framework is very much a key part of the whole process, and will guide us going forward. As far as some of the tough decisions, as I mentioned, we're definitely, as far as the Reimagine Nanaimo process, the OCP review, we're looking at how the city is going to grow going forward, what form that growth should take, and how those different options and the options being considered at this point would affect our climate mitigation, our greenhouse gas reduction targets, our initiatives going forward. So there's definitely some big decisions that way to be made. And then obviously resourcing to address climate adaptation, the climate change impacts. Obviously, that's going to be challenging as we go forward too.
Jeremy Holm, Director of Development Approvals with the City of Nanaimo, on efforts to mitigate the climate crisis. Following our conversation, Jeremy provided links to more information on the city's climate initiatives. Those are available in the description for this episode on our website, chly.ca/midcoast. You're listening to Midcoast Morning on CHLY.
To gain more perspective on the state of wildfires in the province, I spoke with Fire Information Officer of the BC Wildfire Service, Erika Berg. However, listeners should know that the situation is dynamic and ongoing, so some of the information provided may very well be different as you hear this. Can you tell me the current state of wildfires in BC right now?
So since April 1st, 2021, the BC Wildfire Service has responded to 1,478 wildfires, resulting in nearly 650,000 hectares of area burned. Currently, there are 265 wildfires that are currently burning. 6% of those are attributed to human activity, and just over 70% have been sparked by natural causes. That remaining percentage has yet to be determined. We have fire origin and cause specialists who confirm those causes for us. There are currently 30 wildfires of note, and wildfires of note tend to be fires that are highly visible, very large incidents as well. So we have 30 of those. Several are affecting communities. And so we also do work very closely with Emergency Management BC and various regional districts and local authorities. And so there are a variety of evacuation alerts and orders in place as a result of wildfire activity across British Columbia.
Around the tail end of last month, a state of emergency was declared by the province. This one was slated for 2 weeks with the option to extend or rescind it as necessary. And I noticed that we still are in a state of emergency. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So what a state of emergency does is it actually doesn't impact really wildfire operations. Under the Wildfire Act, the BC Wildfire Service is able to spend as much money as necessary, work with our partner agencies to use as many resources within province as well as out of province to assist with wildfire fighting efforts. So what it actually did do is this wildfire season in particular, there have been many displaced residents as a result of wildfires. And that's where Emergency Management BC comes into play. And what we were finding was that because of the amount of evacuees, we were requiring additional accommodation for those folks. And so that gave EMBC, the province, more control over ensuring that folks do have a place to go in the event of them being displaced by a wildfire. And it is still ongoing, that provincial state of emergency, and so is our wildfire season. So we are continuing to see ups and downs in terms of our weather and conditions that either give us a little bit of reprieve, but then do hike back up to conditions that result in further growth of wildfires and starts of wildfires. So it remains in place to ensure that, or better ensure that folks who are displaced by wildfires have a place to go.
Is there any timeline for the state of emergency? Will it just kind of proceed along with the fire season? And is there a range in time that the fire season typically ends?
Yeah, so in terms of how long the provincial state of emergency is going to be in place, I don't have that answer. The decision to implement one, it takes a variety of folks coming together, representatives coming together to determine whether it is necessary. So if the wildfire season is still like it is currently, then our representatives of BC Wildfire would recommend to the ultimate decision makers that it is in their best interest to either put one in or take one out. So I can't speak to exactly when that will happen. Typically, a wildfire season runs until October, November. Usually in those early fall months is when we are conducting what we call mop-up. So finishing up our work on wildfires, and with the seasonal staff that we bring on every season, their contract typically runs from April to early November.
Speaking back to some of the resources you were talking about that become available in a state of emergency, I'm wondering what kind of resources are being sought in the efforts to fight fires in BC.
So we have, we work through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center, CIFC is what we call them. And so they are the kind of like the middleman, for lack of a better word, in us requesting for those further outside resources. And they then gauge availability both within Canada, outside of Canada. And so that's where our exchange of resources happen. So like earlier this spring, we actually, when we were in a wildfire situation, had yet to ramp up. We actually provided personnel to out east, I believe. And so it goes both ways. Currently, we have over 400 folks supporting us from out of province. It ranges from firefighters to support staff. Support staff consists of people like me, for example, information officers, logistics, task force. And so, and currently we're receiving assistance from Alberta, Parks Canada, Quebec. We've had assistance from the Maritimes. As well, we've had assistance from Mexico, as well as Australia. Our Australian partners who are currently in province are doing a reset, which basically means that they, quote unquote, rest in place, which means that they do a full deployment and then they have necessary days off. And then they do a full other deployment without having to go back and forth. So that's really great that we are able to do that and hold on to them for a bit longer, because the wildfire season is certainly not over yet. We will likely be battling some of these larger blazes into fall. So it's still a busy season ahead for us.
Where I'm calling from in Nanaimo, there is a heat warning in effect. I know that the heat warning is affecting various parts of the province. I'm wondering how this impacts the current wildfire situation.
For sure. So these next 72 hours will likely be challenging for us. We've had a bit of a heat wave. Tomorrow, I think, is when we're supposed to see that the temperatures peak, especially in the south, reaching around 40 degrees in some places, which is extremely hot. And that in conjunction with a cold front that is expected to enter the province late Saturday. That cold front brings about instability or really gusty winds, as well as that risk of dry lightning. So with how conditions have been really hot and dry in areas concerned like the southern interior, southern and central interior, like the southeast, it does that paired with really gusty winds, that can really affect fire behavior and have those fires not only burning more vigorously, but also with those gusty winds from the cold front, it can bring about like shift in direction, which can be actually really dangerous for our folks on the ground. So these next 72 hours, we are all hands on deck and constantly monitoring those conditions out there and responding as effectively and as safely as we can.
There is also a provincial fire ban in effect. Can you speak to that?
Certainly. Province-wide, we have Category 2 and Category 3 open burning restricted. That means anything larger than a campfire. In conjunction with that, we do have campfire bans in effect. So we have those in effect for the entirety of Kamloops, Southeast, and Caribou, those fire centers. As well, we have it for the majority of the coastal fire center where Nanaimo sits. The only area that is excluded from the campfire ban within coastal is Haida Gwaii. So the majority of the province is not permitting open burning. There are some areas that permit it in the northwest, in the Prince George Fire Center. Due to their conditions, it's been kind of a split in terms of the conditions we've seen, where the northwest and some of the northeast are receiving precipitation and some cooler temperatures, whereas in the south, it's been consistently hot and dry. For further information on what constitutes a campfire and what may be even permitted under this restriction, please visit our website. We have a fire bans and restrictions link, and it outlines details of what is permitted, what isn't, where you are situated, how your area may be affected.
And before we wrap things up, is there anything else you think people should know about wildfires in British Columbia? This
continues to be a heightened period of fire behavior. We are anticipating an increase in fire behavior over the next 72 hours. So now is the time to prepare yourself and your property even for wildfire. Preparing in advance may result in less stress. I mean, these are very stressful times, and so we want folks to have those plans in place. Visit firesmartbc.ca for details, as well as Prepared BC for resources on how you can help yourself, your community, your home be more prepared in the event of a wildfire. As well, just to add on to that, familiarize yourself with trusted sources of information. Their social media can hold a lot of misinformation. And if a wildfire is directly threatening your community, the best information sources on evacuation alerts and orders, those potential evacuations, are through your municipality, regional district, or other local authority. So familiarize yourself with where that information is coming from so you can be most prepared in the event that a wildfire does threaten where you are.
You just raised a good point about evacuations. I'm wondering, can you give me the statistics in the province on evacuations or any evacuation orders currently in progress?
So there are a total of 160 evacuation alerts and orders in place issued by, like I said, regional districts, First Nations, and other local authorities. In terms of evacuation orders, meaning you must leave your home as soon as possible, we have 55 in place. And then in terms of evacuation alerts, we have 105. So these evacuation alerts and orders are affecting about 25,000 properties across BC. And the majority of those are in the interior, as you can imagine, given how a lot of our activity is rather concentrated there. And further details on evacuations, please check with our partners, Emergency Management BC. They have a variety of useful social media channels as well that I recommend folks subscribe to so that they can be kept in the know.
Erika Berg, Fire Information Officer for the BC Wildfire Service, on the state of wildfires in the province as of Thursday.
I have been trying to write a haiku for you.
You're listening to Mid-Coast Morning on CHLY. On August 1st, Kamal Parmar became Nanaimo's third Poet Laureate, a position she will hold for the next 2 years. Kamal spoke with me this week about her new role, her style, and one of her favorite genres of poetry, the haiku. I've never actually talked to a Poet Laureate before. What does a Poet Laureate do? What are your specific responsibilities?
Well, I'm supposed to be a literary ambassador to the city. I've got to create awareness of the genre of poetry among the population. Nanaimo has got so much of talent, a lot of poets and writers and artists out there. And I want to bring them to the forefront and to connect them by way of, having poetry workshops, by poetry readings, encourage them to go to the library and enjoy the written word, especially poetry, which is I think it's the end all and be all of writing.
Could you tell me a little bit about your style of poetry?
Yeah, well, I'm actually a nature lover, and so having traveled almost throughout Canada, except for the Maritimes, started my life way back in the prairies, Saskatoon, and even though it's really cold up there, but I just fell in love with the place. And I was mentored with a lot of writers, Louise Haff, I think she's the current parliamentary poet laureate, and other writers in the library. We used to have poetry readings, and I did a lot of, I was mentored by them, and my poetry was kind of polished. So I write a lot about nature, and then coming to Ontario, and then also coming here. I mean, this is it's the most beautiful place on earth, I will call it. So it's basically I write that nature. I feel that poetry is an essential part of human life, and we have drifted away from it owing to multiple reasons, the stress and the active, there's so many responsibilities we like to take on, and, the current situation, especially the pandemic, and when there's a sense of loneliness and lack of connectivity with one's friends and families. So I think poetry is a very good medium to bring everyone together.
How do you think it does that?
Well, first of all, I think, that poetry, like I said, is an essential and integral part of human life. So it's something which is always there. I think each of us is a poet, to say, inside one. And we need to tap into one's talent, and this hidden talent, and we have to tune into ourselves, because the first thing that poetry does is to slow one down, to look inward, to see where we are, who are we, what are we doing, and how to connect with nature. So nature is a big healing force, like I mentioned earlier, and I would like to, you can only write, you can connect with oneself and get healed and get peace of mind is if you look inward and tie yourself away from, the humdrum of life and live in the present moment. And I think poetry teaches us, especially at this time when it's really crucial with the pandemic going on, that we need to slow down, because you see nature, we are slaves to haste. Everything is speeded up. Our work, our relaxation, our various duties that we have to do. We do multitasking, which personally I feel gets a bit too much. But anyway, one has to do it when you have to do it. So if you look at nature, you see that nothing happens more at the leisurely pace at which flowers grow, deer browse, and rivers and streams wend their way through silent valleys. So we are part of nature. Why can't we do it? Why can't we just slow down? In fact, if you slow down, if you write poetry, read poetry, and think about who we are, we'd be able to get a more, not only enriching oneself, but be able to probably get a better work productivity too. There will be peace of mind. So that's how I look at it.
I really like that answer. That kind of helps answer, I think, another thing I was wondering about. When they made a press release about your appointment as the new Poet Laureate, you shared a poem, one of your poems, Summer is Passing. Maybe I'll read an excerpt now for people who aren't familiar with it from the middle section. Summer passes. The breeze, empty of honeysuckle, claps through arbutus and maple leaves, rises and falls among the willow. No longer is there the mundane crescendo of the honeybee, nor the rasp of crickets or cicadas, echoing from overgrown bramblebush. Feathery dandelions dance in the breeze. Children shout and run, chasing butterflies, as summer is passing, and children won't let it go. So that's just a section. I'm wondering what made you choose that poem specifically?
Yeah, because right now, we are in like the summer is actually passing by, and we are going to, if you go up north, it's almost like fall. I've had a couple of poet friends who are saying, we're going to take out our clothes for fall, and we see the colors of autumn coming in, in the maple, aspen, and various trees, and that's another cyclical change, seasonal changes, which I like to, it's the same, resonate with the cycle of life. The childhood, youth, and as we grow old. And so it's a kind of rejuvenation which goes on and on. And so that's something which I really, I'm mesmerized with.
And how would you like to bring that to your role as a Poet Laureate? What kind of stuff would you like to accomplish during your term?
Yeah, my main goal is to lay emphasis on poetry as a healing tool. And I'm laying right now emphasis on trying to rope in seniors. So we are going to have a couple of workshops. And of course, the city is helping me a lot with that. And getting the people out, especially seniors, to connect with them. And because as I said, there's a lot of loneliness and lack of connectivity right now, especially with the pandemic. So poetry as a healing tool, coupled with a bit of meditation, just a poem which leads to short meditation would be, I find, helpful. And then I will lead them to, probably they might read their favorite poems or even try their hand at writing poetry.
So you've got a 2-year term as Poet Laureate.
Yes.
At the end of those 2 years, when you sit down, what do you hope you say, or what do you hope you think about your time?
Oh, well, I think I'm going to enjoy it. I'm really excited about it. And, I keep thinking about how to connect with people, because it's a very responsible and an exciting role. It's responsible in the sense I would like to do what I'm set out to do. Because I'm not that kind of a person, who says something and does something. So I would like to go to the last mile and see that there is the love of poetry is inculcated, have some sort of a anthology or some kind of a compilation of a book, of verses where, the poets or the budding poets can see, okay, hey, this is what we have learned and we want to move forward.
I know you like to work with haiku a lot. It seems to me like whenever a haiku comes up in the world of popular culture, people only talk about the 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, and that seems like that's all I know about haikus, but I think I've heard there's quite a lot more to it than just the syllable pattern. Would you be able to share a little bit more about what makes a haiku?
Well, the Japanese way is what you had described, they sticking to syllabus. However, because of the English sort of grammatical structure and the tenses, etc., you cannot really, strictly stick to these syllables. However, it's a 3-line poem, as you know, it's the shortest poem. So it's basically dealing with seasons, nature, and, it's got no title as such. Like the first 2 lines are about something like you look at a pond or a brook or a shady tree or something. And the 3rd line, I would call it a clincher, because that kind of revives your past or present or whatever. It kind of gives you awakening. Hey, what does the poet say? There's excitement in that.
So there's 3 lines. The first 2 lines are about something in nature, and then the 3rd line is like something completely different, the punch to the gut.
Yes. That's very well said. Yeah, very well said.
Do you have an example of a haiku just handy or maybe somewhere near that you could share?
Yeah, so I can read a couple of lines. Hillsides turn brown, fall approaches, I return home.
Is that like one complete haiku?
Yeah, this is one. So you see out here, the hillsides turn brown, fall approaches. This is all about the colors of nature. And then I return home. So there's a lot in this line.
Got it.
You know, the nostalgia or the excitement of coming home, or, you know, you think of a weary traveler, that kind of a thing. Yeah. And can I just read one more?
Yes, please.
Whisper of spring breeze, dandelions gently sway. Fleeting time.
Oh,
Yeah.
I get it. It's all right there.
Yeah. But it gives, you know, we call it the aha moment. And you did just that. Because it's a kind of, it's more metaphorical, but it just talks about fleeting, about time and how dandelions, you know, they just stay for a couple of hours, or, you know, as kids, we would just blow into it and they would just disperse. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that kind of encompasses everything we've talked about in 3 lines, which I guess is what you're saying is the magic of poetry.
Yes, that's true. That's very well said.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with me today.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thanks a lot, and you have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. You too, Kamal.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Kamal Parmar, Nanaimo's new Poet Laureate, on her recent appointment. That's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Midcoast Morning is hosted and produced by Joe Pugh and Elijah Robinson. Thank you to Jesse Woodward and Arbie for production assistance. Our theme music is Good Company from Nanaimo band Ah Venice. For everyone at Midcoast Morning, thanks again.